You're listening to Greater Good Radio Hawaii. Please visit us online at greatergoodradio.com. Today's guest is Kent Keith, author of one of the nation's best-selling books, The Paradoxical Commandments. Anyway, so you mentioned that your Paradoxical Commandments were tracked all the way to Mother Teresa's wall, and you have an interesting story about how you had found out about finding this out.
Yeah, it was a real surprise. I was at that time belonged to a Rotary Club of Honolulu that was meeting down at the Royal Hawaiian. I'm now a member of the Sunrise Club, but then was a member of that one. And of course, at the beginning of our meetings, like many service clubs, we'd have a poem or a prayer or a thought for the day. And it was September 1997, and my fellow Rotarian stood up and noted that Mother Teresa had passed away a couple of weeks earlier. And he said that in her memory, he wanted to read a poem that she'd written. So I sort of bowed my head to listen thoughtfully to that poem, and what I heard him read was 8 of the original 10 Paradoxical Commandments, exactly as I'd written them 30 years earlier. So that was really amazing. I think sort of the hair rose on the back of my neck or something. I thought, wow, I recognize those. So I went up to him after the meeting, and I said, you know, the piece that you read, where did you get it? And he said, isn't it wonderful? And I said, well, actually, I wrote it. Now, Rotarians are kind and courteous people, so he didn't say anything. He did give me a look. I think the look was, you poor self-delusional megalomaniac, claiming to have written something by Mother Teresa. But I asked him where he'd gotten it, and he said, well, it was in a book about Mother Teresa, and I asked him which one. He couldn't remember. So I went to the bookstore, and I found a whole shelf of books about Mother Teresa. And I found it in the back of one of the books called Mother Teresa, A Simple Path. And didn't say it was by her, and it had been retitled anyway, which makes sense because each commandment ends with the word anyway. All it said at the bottom was a sign on the wall at Shishu Bhavan, the children's home in Calcutta. And that's how I learned that Mother Teresa had put the Paradoxical Commandments up on the wall of her children's home. And that just really, really meant a lot to me. I mean, I wanted to laugh, I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, I wanted to jump up and down, didn't know what to do. And I decided that was about as big a message as I'm ever going to get. And what I decided to do was start speaking and writing about the Paradoxical Commandments again after 30 years had passed.
Coming from an author's perspective, obviously you want to have your works all over the place, but what are the copyright issues for this? If you see your work all over the place being used for various things, people quoting it,
right.
How does that come into play?
Well, I actually did copyright the commandments back in 1968 and renewed them in 2001, so I have a valid copyright. And it's been violated by millions of people. And I'm as an author, I'm saying, the whole mission, the whole point is to get the word out. And so I'm really happy that people are sharing it. People really like the content. They don't really care who wrote it. They just pass it from friend to friend, and off it goes. So the only times that I've really paid attention to that is when, say, for example, someone publishes it in a book and they attribute it to unknown or to somebody else. I'll write to them and I'll say, this is the story and I have a valid copyright and you just violated it, but I'm happy to give you permission retroactively to do what you've already done. And if you reprint the book, make the change, correct the attribution. These are people that I consider kindred spirits. If they really like the commandments, we have something pretty deep in common. So I see them as friends and just ask them as friends to, make the update or make the correction when it's convenient for them.
Well, what about people that take the works and they kind of change it up and change the words and things like that?
Well, there's really no control over that. I mean, people really like the Paradoxical Commandments, but they'll say, well, let me add something or let me change something. That just shows they really care about them and they get this sense of ownership and want to adapt them a little bit to their own use. And I think, that's fine. That's again, it's out there. We're just trying to share a message, and it's delightful that apparently millions of people have gotten the message.
Have you always been a pretty positive person like this where, sometimes when you have something bad happen to you, it's really easy to just sit down and sulk. But have you always been able to be uplifted and have a positive attitude that something good would come out of it? I'm pretty optimistic. I'm pretty positive. I think the key for me is to stay focused on the meaning. For me, finding personal meaning, which is what the Paradoxical Commandments point to, is really a key to how I interpret what happens to me and how I try to focus, how I've picked the different jobs I've had. That's what I was advising those student leaders 37 years ago, is focus on the meaning. And that's a really positive thing, because the meaning is always there for you if you know where to find it. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more on Greater Good Radio.